Hi, my name's Dan Hames. I'm a former deputy head teacher of SEMH school. I've left the teaching profession now and I'm setting up an alternative provision that offers fishing with a view to offering forest school, orienteering, outdoor provision, Duke of Edinburgh. I've been asked to summarise 2 recognised learning theories and explain their relevance to the forest school programme. I'm going to be looking at Lev Vygotsky and Jan Piaget. But before I do that, I just want to briefly talk about Friedrich Froebel, who was the German inventor of the kindergarten in the early 19th century, and he said that play is the highest expression of human development. It is the free expression of what is in a child's soul. He believed in the holistic development of the child through experiential play, and if you think about kindergarten, we know it as a nursery, kinder, child, garten, garden. It's a place where children can grow, can flourish, can thrive and develop through play. Personally, watching the children with my sessions and the experience that I've had with Forest School so far, it's wonderful to see them just happy, playing, exploring, developing, flourishing. But moving on to Lev Vygotsky, he was a Soviet psychologist in the Marxist era in the early 20th century, and he focused on putting the child at the centre of all learning. Vygotsky was an expert in cognitive development and focused on the social aspects of learning and the need for support in the learning process. By support, he referred to scaffolding, which is a process of helping build up the child's understanding of what they were doing. As a former English teacher, I used to do it in my English lessons with sentence starters, with paragraph structures to help the children build their skills and their knowledge. This is also transferable into the forest school setting, where we can help children develop new skills such as tying the knots, such as putting up the tarpaulin, building dens, recognising trees. So with some of the children I've been working with, I'm thinking about Martin, a young lad, a year 7 boy who's now able to recognise at least 6 different trees, whereas at the start of the sessions he didn't know any. He's done this through me working with him using a scaffolding worksheet, and then he's gone off to flourish on his own, so that's great. As I mentioned before, I'm setting up a fishing alternative provision. I know it's nothing to do with Forest School per se, but the lad that I'm working with, Kane, he's had 10 sessions now, and on the first session didn't know anything about fishing. He had ADHD, he was erratic, he could be impatient, but now 10 sessions later he's very calm, he's engaged with the natural world. We talk about the natural environment, we talk about the trees, the birds, the fish, the wildlife, and his development has been through that scaffolding process. How I sat alongside him with my tackle, showed him how to set it up, he copied, mimicked me, and then I built up his confidence through incremental steps to make him the fisherman that he is today, and he's made magnificent progress. So moving on, Vygotsky called it the zone of proximal development. Now, the zone of proximal development is where the child is at that particular moment, and new skills are taught by the teacher or the knowledgeable other, which might be an adult or another pupil, or a friend who can help, who's got more knowledge, who can then help develop that child's zones of proximal development as he moves towards achieving mastery of whatever the task is. Scaffolding is like a walking aid that allows the individual to make progress until eventually they don't need that walking aid. For an example I've got is a young boy that was in my first session called Hamdan. He's from a big family, he's got 7 siblings, he's got lives with his mum. He's not used to working to going in forests. In fact, I don't think he'd ever been into a forest until the first session. And his nature was a little bit erratic, he was unfocused, and it was a bit of a struggle to get him engaged. But by using the scaffolding process of supporting his needs with another boy, Josh, and getting him to copy what Josh was doing, he was very fond of, it enabled Hamdan to engage with the tasks that we were doing and the forest school ethos of connecting with nature. Similarly, another example of the scaffolding was a lad that I was working with called Zach, who couldn't quite understand how to make the reef knot, so I taught him the mantra of left over right and under, and right over left and under, and he built it, and over time, using that mantra in his head, he learned how to do the reef knot, and he practiced it with one of his friends, William, who they did it as they were talking and playing. They were just carrying a little bit of rope around with them, practicing it. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist in the 20th century whose focus was child development. He recognised that children are not as skilled at thinking as adults, and obviously it takes time. Everything takes time as you're a child, like learning to tie your shoelace. Children's brains are developing to the stage where they can use reasoning and hypotheses to think for themselves. They learn through previous thinking, like I mentioned with the shoelace. By repetition, they establish connections in the brain until it becomes automatic. Professor Steve Peters, who wrote the Jim Paradox and a later book called The Silent Guide, which I'm reading now, refers to a substance called myelin, which coats the nerves and makes the connection stronger so that it becomes established. Examples of this are the lad that I mentioned, Zach, tying his knot, and Martin, who I mentioned earlier, who can now recognise 6, 7 maybe trees, which has been a stepped process, recognising them each session. So we're making good progress there. Piaget used the term schemas to define the different stages a child develops knowledge. I predominantly work with children 11 plus in secondary settings, SEBD settings. So they've passed through the earlier stages of the sensorimotor, which is up to 2 years of age, the pre-operational between 2 and 7 years of age, and the concrete operational, which is 7 to 11 years. Although some are limited by SEN diagnoses, which the environment of the forest school can help repair or fix, because it's not in the school setting, which affects the development, the frustrations of being in the classroom. Whereas compared to the freedom of the forest and the emphasis on the child-centred development. So 11 years and older is called formal operational stage, repeating patterns, which establishes techniques like the myelin that we just talked about. So at first the group that I was working with in the sessions, they couldn't put up the tarp, obviously, because they were new to it, and I would instruct them and show them what I was doing. So William, hold that bit, Hamdan, hold that bit, Josh, hold that bit, I'll secure this, and I showed them how to use the timber hitch to secure it to the trees. And by the end of the sessions, the 6th session, they were putting it up themselves. They'd learned it incrementally, watching me as I'd done so. Piaget's schemas were supported by Chris Athey. She supported in the 1980s. She supported that repeated patterns of behaviour assist in the cognitive development of acquiring a new skill. And with the 6 sessions, the routine of games to start and the structure of the sessions, the children became more comfortable and knowing what was going to happen, and they were more open to discuss and more accepting of what we were going to be doing. Kathy Nutbrown later supported the schema benefits, saying that adults recognise that what kids are interested in and then extend their learning by similar stretching activities, sometimes called differentiation in the classroom setting, which you can transfer into the forest school setting. Obviously, you give tasks, you have to know your children, you have to know their capabilities, so you can give them tasks that are suited to their ability. And obviously, you've got to be aware of giving children different activities to stretch them and to make them achieve more. So, can I move on to explain ways in which Forest School fosters resilient, confident, independent and creative learners? Obviously the setting is a calm setting, it's natural, it's peaceful, it's quiet, it's not hectic like the classroom where you might hear noise from other classes or the corridor or children in your own class. We have the sound of nature. We have a child-focused emphasis. It's all about the child leading the learning, which is what Vygotsky talked about. We're on a journey of discovery. There's opportunities for mindfulness, whether it's like looking at the minute details of the tree bark, or an insects underneath a rotting tree stump, or looking at the flames of the fire. Mindfulness, focusing the children's minds to eradicate any worries of the world. We're encouraging risk-taking and also recognition of what causes risks and hazards, and recognising how we can avoid endangering ourselves. We're talking new skills and creativity and talking and communication skills, And we're away from school, we're away from the building. It's a totally different environment, and it encourages children to succeed. Coming from an SEMH background, I recognise the benefits of working outside the classroom with children with ADHD and other conditions. The children become resilient at my sessions. The children found some tasks hard to achieve, but by repeated revisits, they managed to achieve, such as the knots, such as the putting up the tarpaulin, recognising the trees, building the dens, all of that. They managed to achieve by sticking at it and recognising what they'd done wrong, and then building on that to make it success. While working with another school on a rainy day, it was developing the resilience. They didn't want to come out, it was wet, but I introduced an orienteering course. They engaged fully with it. We talked about the trees, the fungus, the plant life, the wildlife, etc., and they really engaged with it, and they became resilient to the outdoor conditions, the weather. They become confident, the children I've worked with. I've loved to see William, a lad in one of the groups, growing confidence during my sessions. He developed new ideas and dens, and he was often off working on his own, creating new ideas, becoming more confident with his ability. And of course, Hamdano, I mentioned, session 1, not attentive, not reluctant to engage. By session 6, he was a key member, and he was all over it, and he was dead keen. So the growth in him, in his confidence, was remarkable. It encourages independence. It's a delight to watch the group thrive independently. While they started off as a group or in pairs, as the sessions proceeded, they chose to work independently and build on their own. We were doing some den making at the time. We saw great skill there, which led into some creative thinking as well, where we saw Hamdano, I talked about before, who used he found an old bin bag in the woods, and he used it as a layer in his den to make it waterproof, showing great creative thinking. It's wonderful to see the creative aspects of their personalities, and I absolutely buzz off seeing them make such great progress. Okay, so explain the learning and development through play, how learning and development through play has been implemented during my own Forest School programme. So first of all, it's about routine. Always start with the brief review of the previous session, the Forest School ethos, and what we're going to be doing today. And then we have the warm-up games, the 1, 2, 3, where I use it, fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant, and I'm surprised that kids in Year 7 or Year 11 absolutely engage with it massively. Or Manhunt, they love that as well, and it's amazing. The game, in school, these sort of games might end in tears or with incidents of bullying, but I've been amazed how the children buy into it and accept the rules of play. It's amazing, the Forest School approach. Play is vital as it encourages the social interaction without much... Alexa, off! Sorry about that. Play is vital as it encourages social interaction without much input from the Forest School leader, although sometimes it's nice to be called into the meetings, into the games, and join in with the 1, 2, 3, where are you, or Creeping Comanche. I really enjoyed that. Hamdan was fantastic at that, which shows his growth, his independence, and his resilience. He's not engaged at the start, and by the end of it, he was like, can we have a game of this, can we do this? He really bought into it. In school, play, of course, is allowed at specific times, playtime, dinner time, but I found they enjoyed the availability of play at Forest School, which in turn connected to them to the Forest School ethos. I love watching them create the games and participate in it. Okay. Explain how Forest School promotes self-esteem and emotional intelligence. Well, Maslow said that self-esteem is a combination of confidence, achievement, being respected by others and showing respect for others. And each of these occur in every session at Forest School. Building routines into the sessions facilitate their growth. Hamdan was reluctant at first, but as each session flowed, he grew more engaged. Creating a culture within the sessions that allows each of these needs identified by Maslow to flourish. With the sequences of the sessions, the kids know where they are, they know what we're going to be moving on to next, and they know the time where they can have some free time at the end just to enjoy being in the woods. It develops confidence, respect, and achievement. Coming together at the start and at the end allows the Forest School leader to manage the growth of each member's journey, self-esteem, and we talk about the successes. We encourage praising each other, we encourage listening to each other, we encourage expressing themselves, and we listen. and most of the children engage well with each other, which in turn develops their confidence and self-esteem and emotional intelligence. Learning about themselves and the situations they're in develops an inner belief in themselves. With one group, when they asked if they could climb a tree, I said, yeah, of course you could, but let's just have a quick chat about the dangers, about the risks and the hazards, and what we can do about it. And then, they listened, they contributed, and they were away, and they practiced what they preached, and they didn't do anything daft, but they enjoyed climbing the tree. All behaviour is communication. As the Forest School sessions develop, so does the behaviour and the communication. There's been a huge difference in the start of sequence of lessons, and from the start to the end. I can't say that enough. So, moving on to the next one, the concept of holistic development. What is meant by holistic development? Well, it's how the person at Forest School nurtures new experiences and skills to improve oneself in different areas. There's two brilliant acronyms that the Forest School uses. One is PILS, which stands for physical, intelligent, language, emotional and social and spiritual, and SPICES, which is social, physical, intellectual, communication, emotional and spiritual. Forest School develop their potential to the best that they can be, those that are taking part. So in terms of physical, well, it's constant exercise, constant moving, crouching down, getting up, moving, carrying, lifting, climbing, running. It's constant energy being consumed. It's intellectual. You're learning new things. You're learning about the world. You're learning about nature. You're learning about trees. You're learning about the environment, ecology. It's amazing. Moving on to language, it's all about speaking and listening to each other and accepting what other people have got to say. For instance, with the game 1, 2, 3, where are you? It's like, where are you? 1, 2, 3, where are you? I'm over here. You're listening. You're enjoying yourself, and you're working socially. It's a game. It's a fun thing. Social skills are making massive progress throughout the Forest School. You're making time to sit and talk together. You're listening to each other. You're allowing people to have opinions, which you don't always do in the school setting. Spiritually, you're connecting with nature. You're listening to the world around you. You listen to the wind in the trees, the birds in the trees. You're listening to everything about it, and you get close to nature when you're doing it. Emotionally, you're seeing how children grow all the time. They become more independent, they become more resilient, they learn to express themselves. They're not restrained by the confines of the classroom, and they're not sitting in front of a TV or an Xbox. How have I used it? Well, as a former deputy head in SEBD schools, SEMH schools, an advocate of the nurturing approach in schools, I follow these principles in helping the children make progress. Regular engagement with the natural world reinforces the opportunity to promote these principles. Regular engagement, which refers again back to Piaget's schemas, repetition building confidence. Bonds are formed within groups, and I've worked with, and they will continue to grow stronger. I'm working with a guy called John who leads a bushcraft group, and the routines that the children fall into are amazing. One's lighting the fire and sustaining the fire, one's collecting kindling and twigs for the fire and logs, another boy's gone down to the river to get the bucket of water, another couple are putting up the tarpaulin. It's amazing watching them work together. I asked one of them, called Jake, I said, why do you enjoy it so much in the forest? And he said, well, it's not school. He said he felt freer and more relaxed, and this in turn allows him to be comfortable in the forest. So, explain how holistic development is facilitated through schools. Well, with the acronym PILS and SPICES, looking at physical, emotional, spiritual, communication, social, intellectual. We talk about routines. Always start with the same routines. Always complete the lessons with the sessions with the same routines. We're developing communication. One of the groups I work with are mainly Year 11s, and they love the 1, 2, 3, where are you? It's about games, it's about listening. Social skills are developed all the time, opportunities to work with each other, to finish tasks and to laugh with each other. Physically, we're moving all the time, lots of exercise. Spiritually, we're connecting with the natural world. Intellectually, we're learning about new things, we're learning about new words, new vocabulary all the time. We're learning about hazards, we're learning about different fungi, different wildlife. Alfie, the other day, we found a fly agaric, and we looked it up in the little nature book, and we found out about it, learned it's a bit of a tricky little mushroom. I talked with another group about the birch polypore and referred it back to Otzi, the Iceman, who had some on a little necklace around her neck, and they found that thoroughly enjoyable, thoroughly interesting. Growing as individuals to recognise the possible consequences and realisations of the world that we live in. How do you The next one is to explain the role of the forest school leader in promoting learning and development. Well, I've got 20 years plus as a teacher of challenging behaviour, in schools with challenging behaviour, and kids who don't engage well in the classroom. It's all about rapport, using praise, humour, building relationships, positive engagement, listening to the children, build really good relationships with some kids who are now in their 20s, even 30s, still friends with them. It's about establishing routines where the children like to know where they are, with different activities, breaking it down into different sections of the session. You know, the warm-up, the activity, the fun time, the talking. And it's about peer support, getting them to work together, buddying systems, all brilliant, all helping each other, promoting and encouraging a buddying system that engages the children to work together. And it's all about me as the forest school leader being a role model and modelling behaviour, wearing the right clothes, using tools and fire safely, and speaking to them all with respect. How I speak will set the standards of behaviour. Thanks.